Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Lacey Biller Show. I am Lacey Biller, and I am also grateful. I want to start off by thanking so many of you. So many of you have been so kind to offer feedback and to, share my episodes with your friends. And many of you contacted me personally and have been really supportive and really kind and encouraging. I've been wanting to do a podcast for so long, and uh, it. What I like about this most, though, is that anybody, we all have people that talk at you and talk to you. I don't need more of that, and you probably don't either, do you? What what I want to create here is that I want to talk with you. I want this to be a conversation. I want it to be that's kind of what I'm going for here. We've all got enough of megaphones and people talking at us. I'd like to talk with you. Um and my ultimate goal for this podcast is to create something that is worthy of your time and your attention. I believe that mental and emotional real estate are the most valuable there is, and that nothing really is more important than the time you spend with those you care about. And making time from your life to spend with me and to recommend it to others, that means more to me than I can even begin to tell you. And so, for me, Christmas has come early, both with your kind words and with the podcast itself. So, I wanted to start out by thanking you very much for all of your kind words and your support. Um, I think eh, I had been delaying recording this episode a bit, but now the time has come. I think I'm gonna have to go ahead and do it. I unfortunately do kind of have to talk about the big old elephant in the room, and that would be impeachment of Donald Trump. And uh, if you are tired of hearing about this topic, I absolutely understand. You may wish to take a break until the next episode. Um, I had I'm gonna be straight up with you. Um I have been not wanting to talk about this on the show. I hadn't wanted to do it. I didn't want to talk about things of the political arena. Um I think, politics and current affairs are very important to me. They are since I've been a kid. Literally, I have been following this since I was a kid, since elementary school, and uh, I was that kind of kid. um, but I understand that many people don't want to hear about it and are deeply uncomfortable hearing about it discussed in public. And, and I'm sympathetic to that. Um, I will say one thing about that. We need to bear in mind this country, the United States of America, currently has something like 325 million people in it. And one thing that we need to bear in mind when we're interacting with each other about this and we're trying to learn and sort out what is true versus what seems fishy, um, when you are talking about a large body of people, and I think 325 million is certainly, a third of a billion people. That's a large body of people. Information takes time to penetrate such a large body of people, and it takes even longer to get them to move. It's easy to move small groups of people. It's easy for small groups of people to um, make decisions quickly. But with such a large body of people, it takes time. And the fact that I say this to remind all of us, wherever we are on the political spectrum, that it takes time for people to ideologically understand something, to emotionally understand something. Um, the One of the downsides about living in such a highly matrixed, connected landscape as we do is that you've got information coming in from all sides at all times. And every person is being asked to make more decisions, and I would argue with greater consequence than at any time in the past, arguably. And when you're talking about such a large body of people, they're slow to change. And it's not only in their understanding of facts. One way you see this is that there are a lot of people in this country that are deeply, 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 deeply uncomfortable with politics being discussed in public, in any way, any possible way. There are a lot of people in this country that believe it is deeply rude to discuss something of that nature in public. And I would argue that there are a number of downsides to that. And the biggest is that, in my opinion, we don't know how to talk about this stuff intelligently. When you make things off limits and when you say that they can't be talked about, you lose the ability to do it effectively and to do it in a way that you can learn from. So I would argue that the way to learn how to talk about politics is to do it, or at least learn about it. But we have to be mindful that, up until the last few years, that was a deeply personal thing to a lot of people. And even if you agreed with each other, the fact was that you didn't talk about it. And people are going to be slow to change on that, if they ever do. I mean, we've seen movement on that, but bear that in mind. As it might help understand some of what we're seeing. We live in a society now where you have to make so many decisions on so many things. You have to be present and you have to be plugged in all the time. And humans, that's the exact opposite of human nature. You know, the humans are geared to want to have fun. We want to have fun. We want to pay attention to the stuff we like, and you know, um, it's gonna take time. We don't part of the thing about this whole impeachment deal is that we don't even really have language to talk about some of the things that are happening and that we have seen, and to try to begin to understand. We don't even have words for some of this stuff. So when we say that we're in uncharted territory and that we're all kind of figuring this out for the first time, that's what we mean. Um and I'm very I've been watching this from afar, and I've been trying to figure out what I was gonna say tonight. I was hesitant to do this episode. I didn't want to talk about this, especially so soon in a new show, because I certainly understand that it's divisive, and that many people are really, really uncomfortable talking about this stuff in public. I mean, really, it makes them deeply uncomfortable. And the last thing that I want to do is to make it to where people can't be comfortable. But there's comfort, and then there's growth, and that's, I'm a young woman now. I'm in my I'm in my early 30s. I'm a grown woman, and part of being a grown woman and a stakeholder in this country is that I have to recognize. I feel as though I have a duty to engage with this and to bear witness and to try to learn. I'm a historically minded person. I'm always talking about history, culture, society, systems, networks, all of that. And I feel a great duty to try to take from this what I can and to learn, but I also feel greatly inadequate trying to respond in this moment. And I've thought all this time about what I was going to say tonight. You know, when tonight, for those of you who haven't been paying too much attention, the House voted yes on two articles of impeachment tonight. The House of Representatives did. And so now the next step is for those to be forwarded to the Senate and for the next part of the process. And I've been looking at this for a long time, and I've been trying to figure out what I was going to say for a long time, because I've been conflicted on impeachment since the beginning. The deal with impeachment's complicated, because on one hand, yes, our elected officials, I would argue, of course, they have a higher duty, to the duty that they swore to uphold. They are our elected representatives, and they are the people we have put in charge of running this place on our behalf. However, part of the deal with this is that not everybody is operating in good faith, and when you're at the level of checks and balances and the three branches of government and all of these things, is that so much of this is not codified in law. It's precedent, good faith, what's always been done before. So one of the things that I feel I have a duty to try to learn is what allowed this to be possible in the first place. And what can we do to prevent, to protect ourselves going forward? Because what people need to understand is that there is no going back. No sitting president has ever been removed from the office by impeachment. It is possible that this might turn out to be the first time, but we've not ever done this yet. So, removed a president that way. So we need to keep in mind, in this case, in 2019, the next step in this process is for it to go to the Senate. Well, the Senate is controlled by Republicans. The House currently is controlled by Democrats, but the Senate currently is controlled by Republicans. So, a president being removed from office via impeachment would mean that enough Senate enough Senate Republicans would have to go along. And that strains credibility to anybody that's paying attention. I'm not ruling it out, but it strains credibility. And so we've got some questions to ask ourselves. What happens if we don't remove him that way? Because the thing about 2020 is that, we never sealed up any of those entry points in 2016. We're more divided now than we were then. And the Russians and everybody that ever wanted to do us harm now has 3 years of data to work from. They saw how we reacted to the initial incident, and now they never left, and now they're back in force with all that data on how we've reacted over the years. And what people need to understand about these attacks is that they're going to get harder and harder to spot. And that, I don't know what we do about that, because if the notion of having free and fair elections is that you as a human being living in America that votes, is you cast your vote depending on the information that you have, information that can be contaminated by any moment, at any moment, by any person. If the onus is not on you, if you take in misinformation and you act on it, that all you have to do to corrupt an election is to corrupt people. That's it. All you have to do is to manipulate them into voting one way or the other. And there's a few ways that this can be stopped, right? The people putting things into the information stream, it's on them to make good decisions. Arguably, it's on the platform to ensure that they cannot be misused, which admittedly will always be incredibly difficult and probably a losing battle. And then of course, I would argue that it's on every one of us to only act on information that we know to be true. If there's nothing to stop people from putting bad things in, if there's nothing to remove bad things once they're in there, no substantive real measures, and there's nothing, and the people consuming the information are not going to be conscientious and judicious in doing so, then I mean, that's pretty much the game, isn't it? I mean, if we don't, at least one of those things has to change. We have to start being mindful about what we consume. But honestly, that's probably never really going to happen. And so there's some things that we need to decide. And one of them is what we're going to allow the role of platforms like Twitter and Facebook to be in the future. Because if they are allowing it, a lot of this information dissemination happens through them. And if they are allowed to operate with profit being their only guiding star, that's a problem for free speech. That's a problem. That's a big problem. And you have to understand that they gain nothing. Twitter and Facebook and all of them, they gain nothing from sniffing out and rooting out these fake accounts. See, Facebook especially, when you go public and you're listed on the stock exchange, when you have shareholders that you have to report to, if you don't show a profit and you don't show improvement quarter over quarter, you can be turfed if you don't, haven't taken other measures to prevent that, like, owning enough stock and all of that stuff. A controlling interest, that is. So there's nothing motivating them to do the right thing. There's nothing motivating them because if they start going through and not taking money from Russia and these, and the Saudis and anybody else wanting to do us harm, and they start putting in, more controls, it's going to lower their profit. And when you have to answer to shareholders and that's literally all they care about, if you go in there and you say, you show that you've got less profit, and also you have to say, oh, well, we got rid of these millions of fake accounts. These people need to be able to say how many active users that they have and how many have stayed with the site over time. And if they have to cut out all of these fake accounts and stop taking money and, from some places, their profit's going to go down. They have every incentive to do everything but the right thing. So we need to talk about that as a populace and decide how is this going to be going forward. What kind of regulatory changes might make sense. And that's a hard pill to swallow, because one of the things that the impeachment brouhaha has shown about our institutions is that, things happen at the speed of light and the news cycle is always on, but the process of actually enacting change is basically stuck in amber. Our legislative process. We don't, the laws that we have are ill suited, not at all well suited to the realities of modern day economics, modern day commerce, and the process of actually getting those changed. I don't know how we respond to that. I don't, because the thing about large institutions is that they're not meant for agility. They're meant for stability. They're meant for, they're meant for fortification. They're meant for strength and stability. They're not meant to be jumping around. They're not meant to be nimble. They're not meant to be quick. Here, if you need an example of how this works in real life, think about the military. Everybody likes to trash the military and talk about how inefficient they are and make jokes about the nomenclature and all the forms and all the systems and all that. Here's the reality. The reason that the DoD infrastructure and, the military, the reason why all of that is so complicated and it's such a mess is because we ask them to be able to potentially handle anything with literally no notice, and to be able to go literally anywhere on the planet within about a few hours' notice. When you don't have to maintain that kind of capability, you don't have to maintain that kind of infrastructure. But when you ask them to be responsible for the entirety of the planet and to be able to teleport, zap yourself there with 3 seconds notice, the supply lines are going to get long. You hear what I'm saying? It, you got to be realistic. And so, yes, there's always a lot of ways that, things can be improved on. But you have to keep in mind how these systems are, big, like the DOD and the military. There, there's always going to be a lot of, red tape, and, you got to talk to 17 people to do something. That's because the infrastructure is so big. So if you want less overhead, great. Offer fewer services. I mean, it really is one or the other. See, that's the thing about adding layers of complexity that people don't understand. When you have something that has a lot of different capabilities and a lot of bells and whistles, with every bell and whistle that gets added, there is a possibility for something to break, or to be misused, or to go wrong, or to be used in a way that was different than what was intended. The more capability you have, the more you have to manage. The more stuff you have, the more you have to dust. Um, and so it's important to be realistic and to realize that with 1/3 of a billion people, it's going to take them some time. Not only intellectually, but emotionally. Unfortunately, we don't really have that time. We don't. We didn't even have the time back in 2016, let alone now. And I, it, I'm very, I feel very inadequate in this moment. um, and I've seen people talking about how they were happy. I'm not happy. I I'm not cheering about this. I if anything, it's a little. There's mourning. I would say is more what I feel. I'm sad. It's a sad day. It it's not it's not good. It, it's a sad thing, and it's something that when this is never gonna be over. Much like the fallout from 9/11. We're 18 years gone, and it has never ended, and it's never going to. This is something that we are going to have to live with now. But it's not going to be possible to turn our faces from this. We're going to be asked about this. We're going to be asked about what were you doing? When all of this was happening, what were you doing? I can tell you what I was doing today. Today I plan to go to Target to get some stuff for my closets. But I feel a great responsibility to bear witness. I'm an American citizen. Um I that's very important to me. I try very I feel that duty. I feel that responsibility. It's almost like a coat. I feel it very tangibly. And I feel as though um I wish that I could be more eloquent, and that I could be more um that I could have more perspective. But look, I'm 32 years old. This is only my second impeachment, and the last one wasn't like this one. I'm being gentle. I, I'm I'm trying to hold space for myself too. in this moment. I think when it comes to the political arena, we get so bogged down in the horse race aspect, especially during political, election cycles. This person, they're up 2 percentage points, and the Gallup poll shows this, and this person's about to take this primary, and this person bombed out of this caucus real bad, and you know, I I'm sad for my country, man. I don't. I'm sad for us. I I'm less interested really um in the procedurals and all of that. I've been trying to figure out what I was going to say tonight for a long time, and um I began this podcast by saying that I wanted it to be worth your time um and your effort, and I hope it is, because I am enjoying this despite the subject matter. But I'm feeling a little inadequate in this moment. It's hard to know how to respond when you know that you're living in a historical moment. And it's hard to have poise and to be self-possessed and to know what to say and to know how to feel. Because for me, it's been a little bit like mourning. Um, I've had kind of a difficult year. Both of my grandmothers have died. I've had a number of friends that have died or have almost died. A number of people's animals have died or almost died. It's been a year of a lot of close calls, a lot of uh, a lot of thinking, a lot of good stuff, but a lot of sadness too. And um, I've had some vacation time lately, and I've been going to some historic sites and capturing some pictures and getting historical markers and all that. And part of it's the time of year, part of it's the impeachment cloud and all that, but and maybe it's leftover reverberations from having encountered so much loss in such a relatively short time period. Uh, but I feel like I'm seeing a lot of the death of empires. A lot of abandoned buildings and stuff no longer used and all of that, which all empires die. All of them. You lengthen the timeline long enough and everything ends. The important part is what you do before then. And we never know how much time that's going to be. And so, it behooves us to conduct ourselves in a fitting manner. And maybe it's because Christmas is 7 days away. Um, Technically 6 now. It's early the morning of it's early Thursday the 19th as I record this. I tried to I did a first take of this episode, and it was rough, so I ditched it. But it's hard to know how to respond to history. You know, it's hard. It's hard to know. It's hard to be an evolving, thinking, feeling person. Um, for me, it's hard to. I've been trying to. This year, I've been focusing on balance. Um, and one of my biggest concentration points is how to balance being, you know, learning what life has to teach you and seeing what life has to show you, but also retaining the knowledge of who you are and what you've seen and what you've lived through. And never thinking that you're a finished final product. And certainly not doing it as young as I am. It's hard to do all that, especially when sometimes I don't want to. Sometimes, I always try to be on the quest for self improvement, but sometimes it's hard. I don't always want to. Sometimes I'm happy for today, and I'm okay with that. I don't think you have to always be on the hamster wheel, but um right now I'm trying to keep my eyes open, and all of this podcast notwithstanding, um I'm trying to keep my mouth shut and my eyes open. I'm trying to learn. I feel like there's a lot I need to learn, and I'm trying to do it, but it's hard. Sometimes all I want to do is sit and eat chicken wings and play Mario Kart. Um, oh, I got some. This is kind of a side note, but yesterday I went to Barnes and Noble and I got some Golden Girls bookmarks. I'm looking at them right now. Uh, I am all about some Golden Girls gear. Let me tell you, I watch Golden Girls, Maude, Designing Women, all of that. I still watch it a lot. And I've been thinking about doing an episode, or a series of episodes, maybe a segment. I'm not sure. About Designing Women and Golden Girl, about some of these shows and aspects of them. Like for instance, and we may or may not come back to the impeachment stuff. uh, Sorry, I tried not to laugh so loud in the microphone. Whoops. Still getting used to this, y'all. Um, but so here's this thing I've been thinking on lately with Golden Girls. Um, there's a piece that I've been considering writing about B. Arthur, and it's gonna be a long piece, and I'm gonna have to do a lot of research for it. So, um, I haven't written it yet, but basically, B. Arthur was fascinating. She was a fascinating character. Betty White's written several books. Rue McClanahan wrote a book. Estelle Getty wrote a book. And uh, I have Rue's, I have Estelle's, I have one or two of Betty's. B. Arthur, on the other hand, never wrote a book. And that's a shame, because of everybody, I would have wanted to have read her book the most. Um, Now, some of you may not know, B. Arthur came up through the theater. Um, Betty White was very much a television, a California television gal. Estelle Getty came up through New York theater. She was the way that she was discovered was that she was doing this seminal play in New York called Torch Song Trilogy. And I believe one of the producers of the Golden Girls saw it and decided to have her in for auditions, if memory serves. Um, Now, Rue McClanahan's autobiography is an amazing read. It's called My First Five Husbands and the Ones Who Got Away. And I highly, 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 highly recommend that book. I don't know if there's an audio version, but if there is, I would encourage you to find it and consume it, especially if Rue McClanahan is the one that's reading it. That woman really was Blanche Devereaux. I mean, it. I would say method acting. She, in real life, she wasn't from Atlanta, but in all other aspects, she really was Blanche Devereaux. It's a tremendous read, and I highly recommend it. Um, but B. Arthur, it. I wish we'd gotten a book from her because she came up through New York theater. She had that serious theatrical background, and I find it. I wonder whether or not B ever got to a balance that she was happy with as far as her the mixture of her acting to her singing. And uh she could sing. There were numerous episodes in both Ma and the Golden Girls in which she sang. One of them being one of the very last episodes for Golden Girls. It's called Journey to the Center of Attention. And it's the one where Blanche takes Dorothy to the Rusty Anchor. Um, and Dorothy ends up kind of becoming the center of attention for a little bit. And Rue McClanahan has often cited that as her favorite episode in the series, and I can see why. Because she had to use her choreography background to, um, there's you know, I'm not sure I need to give spoilers for Golden Girls, but if so, spoiler alert. Um, but she has to do this scene that's choreographed perfectly. Like she slips and she falls off the piano, she kicks her shoe off, she does all these things. And, Rue McClanahan, when she was still in high school, she owned and she ran a dance studio. So that was in her background from way back. And in Golden Girls, we got several episodes of her dancing and showing that. But with B really is an enigma because in Maud and Golden Girls there were several examples of her singing and dancing. And in both of those circumstances, B was the one to call it quits. Um, with both Maud and Golden Girls. Now, of course, Golden Girls, they kept Estelle, Rue, and Betty kept going. They did the Golden Palace, but Betty has spoken about the Golden Palace a few times, and I get the feeling that she's a little bit annoyed. I feel like she wanted to keep going. And I feel like maybe I'm misreading it, but I feel like there was some irritation. Because I feel like she definitely wanted to keep going, and, she's talked about trying to do, the process of trying to do the Golden Palace without B. And if memory serves I think I saw it on, the Lifetime Intimate Portrait, for one of the Golden Girls. And Betty said, it's like trying to do it with a table. You need all four legs. You can't do it with just three. And I thought that was revealing. But from all indications, it's fascinating because, with B, she had such a reputation for, being it, with Maud, a limousine liberal, and a big, brassy, loud, tall, you know, God, I'll get you for that one. Well, that was a terrible impression. Forget I did that. Anyway, um, but she had that kind of uh reputation. Carol Burnett, on the Carol Burnett show, they even did a parody of it, and it's called Broad, and it's pretty hilarious actually. um, it's on YouTube, or at least it was the last time I checked. It's called Broad. I would type in probably Carol Burnett show Broad, and it should come up. It's pretty funny. Um, but Rue McClanahan, and I think even Betty White had said um, that people came up to him all the time and asked how it was to work with B, and they said that she was nothing like Maud, and nothing. She was not like this big, loud, imposing, intimidating um Angela Lansbury. The two of them were close, and they were friends going way back to, I think, their stage days. Um, and she was nothing like that in real life. And in later years, before B died, she was doing this one woman show. And I wanted to go to it, but it never came anywhere around here, I don't think. And apparently in this one woman show, she did told some stories, sang some songs. Apparently, if memory serves, she told some jokes, and I think Rue McClanahan said that they were kind of a bit bawdy, a bit risque, if memory serves, which is kind of interesting. So I I get my point with all of this is that um B apparently was nothing like the characters that she portrayed, which it's a funny thing. That's why they call it acting. Um, but I have to wonder. She really seemed to be devoted to her family, and it seemed as though she was I don't know if I would even say uncomfortable with the rigors of being an actor and all that. Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to hit that. Still getting used to this. I got a little too excited there. Started waving around. Um, I don't know whether she found the rigors of it too much, or uh whether she really just wanted to be home with her children. That's kind of how it seemed to me based on the coverage of her and the things about her that I have read. It seemed like she would really be rather be at home with her family. Um, and I think we ask a lot now, especially now that I'm doing comedy, and that I've started learning rudimentary photography. I always say that I'm learning photography concepts. I can't call myself a photographer. I have a respect for the medium, and I understand that I'm not a photographer really, but I'm not sure when you get to call yourself one. Uh, but I whatever that threshold is, I'm probably not there. So I try to say that I'm learning that instead of that I am that. Um, that's probably semantics to most people, though. I don't know. I feel like now that I I never considered myself an artist, and then in the last year, really, I started considering myself an artist. really the last few months. And it, I think and it's really made me realize how much we ask, um, from you know, from artists, and what we put onto them. Um, and comedians especially, which I probably would say that because I am a comedian, but I've learned so much from comedy this year. But I think the biggest thing that I've really realized is that, comedians are the modern day alchemists. They take sadness and misery and all of the things that you would rather forget, and if you're lucky, you get a killer punchline out of it. You take all of that stuff and you spin it into gold that people take to try to sustain themselves with. And that's really important. And there's a lot that, uh there's a lot. I never thought, I always thought it was a silly thing when I heard people describe themselves as artists. Who cares really? Um I never thought I would care, but apparently I do. Apparently it matters to me. Um Humans are silly. The human brain, very silly stuff. Um so there's a lot of, with Golden Girls, there's so much, I feel like it's almost like a kaleidoscope. The more you look, the more that there is to see. And I really, I have to wonder how, whether or not B ever got to a balance that she was happy with, whether or not she ever found roles and, got to a, I kind of got the feeling sometimes that, um, she wanted to incorporate, like the world saw her as only an actress, but, she wanted to incorporate singing too, or they only saw her as a singer, for this moment, but she wanted to put acting in it too. Um, like a great example of what I mean, is, there's a scene in the episode I was talking about earlier, Journey to the Center of Attention. And B. Arthur is talking to the, piano player. And the piano player starts singing, or playing the song What'll I Do, which is a beautiful song. And, the way that B played it was perfect, because she starts singing along in a low voice, kind of, with this piano player. And, she gets, I think, to the end of the first verse or whatever. And, instead of stopping singing or keeping going at the volume that she was at, if memory serves, her voice gets way louder for one thing, and then she like turns around and turns her body around, and she projects her voice, like, she raises her volume, but she projects it in a way, you know and she does so many things in this moment. She pulls the rest of the bar in. But also, she's playing this super, serious song being sung in this super serious manner, but she's turning it on its head with, raising her voice. in using it for comedic effect. And the impression that I get, and we'll never know because we don't have a book, and I really wish we did, but we don't. The impression that I get from her is that she always kind of wanted to incorporate things like that when she could. And I have to wonder whether she ever got to a place where, uh, what her optimal balance was. Um, she, a very compelling figure. Um, very compelling. The more you look at Golden Girls, the more there is to see. Um, in television, it's hard to. One of the things that comedy has taught, really reinforced for me, and I already knew it, but it's harder when you're trying to do it yourself. It's really hard to create something that has any kind of substance and staying power. It's really hard to. Most comedy, for example, um, most comedy does not age well. It is very difficult to create comedy and humor that will endure for very long. Most of it is incredibly context specific and specific to the moment in which it was produced, and um, it doesn't make. If you come along after the fact, it's hard to get out of it. It's hard to get absolutely everything out of it. But Golden Girls and Designing Women and these types of shows, they uh and to a lesser extent Maude, um a lot of that aged pretty well. Not all of it, but the humor, um it really is a master class. And I I continue to learn. I keep laughing, I keep learning, Um and I think that's the note that I want to end this on, there's a lot going on in terms of impeachment and what's going on with our world, and you know, um this may not be the only time that I discuss that on this show. I hadn't wanted to because it's so divisive, and because I had hoped to not begin this show talking about political matters. I understand that many people are very uncomfortable, but uh, I would be remiss in not talking about it. It's important to capture it. Um, I feel inadequate talking about it in the moment, but it's important to talk about it. You it's in We have to talk about it, and then we've got to act. We sure do. We got to act. Um, but as I record this now, it's mid December. Christmas is approaching. New Year's is approaching, and um, you know, I this year has been pretty rough for me. I'm happy to see it go in a lot of ways, but um, instead of thinking about all the stuff that's happened, um, I want to think about the good times to come. Yes, we have a lot going on with impeachment and all that, but life goes on. Um, I don't know how I would have made it this year without comedy, without and here's one thing I'll say. I didn't think that it, you know, I didn't think it would be important to consider myself an artist, quote unquote. I've considered myself a writer for a pretty long time. You know, I'm I've been trying to work lately on caring more about what's in the boxes instead of the boxes themselves and the labels on the boxes. Um, and so I didn't really try to put too much of a label on it. I don't really care about that because it doesn't, labels don't last. Well, they don't have to last anyway. But I love the process of being a comedian. The the artistic process. And it's really not that much different in some aspects than being a writer, but I love the process of thinking about a new bit. You know, you're talking with somebody and you realize all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I can use that on stage. I got to write that down. And um I love it. I love being an artist. I love the chase. I love the hunt. I love whittling a new joke down. I love going through material. I love that. And this year, for me, this year was really heavy. But I can tell you, I can tell you that I remember I had a lot of good nights in this year too. And there's a lot of good things to come. And I think that's what I'd like to close this on. Um, this has been episode 2 of the Lacey Biller Show, and I there's so much, to talk about, and we will continue doing that. But more than anything, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your continued attention. I want to thank you for, listening and sharing if you choose to. And more than anything, for our time together. We've got good things coming up this year, and, so many of you are, embarking on new adventures, but really right now I'd like to talk. And so I have had a lot of fun doing that. And um, I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap this puppy up. This has been episode 2 of the Lacey Biller Show, and I will be coming at you with episode 3 pretty soon. Until next time, have a great one. Take care.